And are we live? Yes, we are live.
Okay, so welcome everybody. You might want to turn the camera towards us. Okay, so welcome everybody who's online. I hope we have somebody. We're sorry for the delay. We had a little technical problem, and happy to have those of you who are here in person with us. So
Thank you for coming.
thank you for coming, and I hope there will be more. So let us begin with a prayer together. And since we're going to chant together, we're pretty well spread out and it's outdoors. I think we're allowed. You can go ahead and respond to the prayer. So let's offer this prayer together. Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
beloved friend God,
beloved friend God,
great masters of self-realization,
great masters of self-realization,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Lahiri Mahashwaya,
Swami Sri Yukteswarji,
Swami Shri Yukteswarji,
beloved Guru,
beloved Guru,
Paramhansa Yoganandaji,
Paramahansa Yoganandaji,
saints and sages of all religions,
saints and sages of all religions,
beloved Swami Kriyananda,
beloved Swami Kriyananda,
lovingly we invoke your presence
lovingly we invoke your presence
and your blessings.
and your blessings.
Beloved Swamiji,
Beloved Swamiji,
we honor your discipleship,
we honor your discipleship,
your example,
your example
for all of us to follow.
for all of us to follow.
Bless our lives,
Bless our lives,
that we may follow the path
that we may follow the path
that leads to freedom.
that leads to freedom.
Guide us.
Guide us.
Om.
Om.
Peace. Amen. So, welcome. This evening we will share chanting. Most of these chants, with one or two exceptions, are chants that Swami Kriyananda wrote. As you might have gathered from the prayer this evening, we are honoring the anniversary of his discipleship, which technically falls on Sunday the 12th. It's the 12th of September. But we wanted to do this as part of this evening, as part of our Friday Kirtan series. And we'll share some readings and I'll share a few thoughts later on, just touching on Swamiji's life of discipleship. And I'll just share one thought at the beginning here. We'll have a little reading that Swamiji himself gives. He's reading a little section of the New Path, and it's just I won't tell you what it is yet. It can be a little bit of a surprise, but it just struck me how this is an era of fresh energy, and that's what Master brought. And that's what Swami tried to show us. And later on, I'll talk a little more about how he tried to show us that and how we can sort of emulate and follow in his footsteps. But I didn't have that audio book. I thought I had everything. I thought I had the whole stack. And I went to look for it because we wanted this one particular reading. And I looked through all the audio files that I have and was like, well, where is it? And it wasn't there. And so I went online and I downloaded it. Just like that.
Wow.
I mean, just like literally in the last 30 minutes. And it's on my phone, and God willing, with the technology, hopefully we can jump that hurdle, but I think we can play it. If I could even just hold my phone right in front of the microphone, but I think we can play it right into the system. And it's just amazing. And that is an example of Dwapara Yuga. You couldn't do what I just did a half an hour ago. You couldn't do that 20 years ago, 30 years ago. There's just no way. 50 years ago, they wouldn't even known what you were talking about. I mean, yeah, you could have had cassette tapes, maybe. Not 50 years ago, probably, but anyway, it's just, this is an age of energy and movement, and, it's like it's sped up in certain ways, and yet, Master came to bring us to our center, not to have us sort of get spun out on, because, you can just spin out on new technology. There's no end to it. But anyway, and I'll tell more stories later about how Swamiji related to that and how Master related to that as well. But anyway, this evening we'll chant together. We'll have little pauses. Because we're here in person, I think we'll have a couple of longer meditations, longer than we would typically do. I sort of feel like when it's just the two of us and the camera's rolling and kind of that's it, if we pause for longer than 5 or 10 minutes, I just feel like we kind of lose people, because it's hard to convey the spirit of a meditation online. But when we're here in person, it's nice to be able to have some meditation. So anyway, in between each chant, there'll be a little pause as is typical, but then we'll also have, a couple of meditations that are a little longer. So anyway. Yeah, do. Yeah, don't ask, just do. Yeah, it's always better to have it recording. So we'll begin as Swami would begin countless satsangs back in the day when he was chanting himself, leading the chanting himself, and then later on as he would have others of us, including Nirmala, lead the chant for him. He would have us do Door of My Heart, or he would do it himself. So we'll begin with Door of My Heart. And feel free to sing, those of you who are here. It's one of God's gifts to us to be able to actually sing out loud occasionally.
Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me?
Wilt thou come,
just for once come to me? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, I look for thee night and day, night and day, night and day. I look for thee night and day. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me? Wilt thou come, just for once come to me? Will my days fly away without seeing my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me? Wilt thou come, just for once come to me? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee.
Rest in God, live in God, in His joy, in His love, and in His
Light.
light. Okay. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Rest in God, live in God, in His love, in His love. Rest in God, live in God, in His love, in His love. Rest in God, live in God, in His love, in His love. Rest in God, live in God, in His joy, in His joy. Rest in God, live in God, in His joy, in His joy. Rest in God, live in God, in His joy, in His joy. Rest in God, live in God, in His joy, in His joy. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Rest in God, live in God, in His love, in His love. Rest in God, live in God, in His love, in His love. Rest in God, live in God, in His love, in His love. Rest in God, live in God, in His joy, in His joy. Rest in God, live in God, in His joy, in His joy. Rest in God, live in God, in His joy, in His joy. Rest in God, live in God, in His joy, in His joy. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Let's meditate together for a few minutes. thought I had them out here, but
That's good. That's good. So this reading will give you a little time to reflect on the ancient lineage that we are all following, the teachings that are so ancient. Master often talked to us of our line of gurus. This is Swami speaking from the New Path. And our guru's special mission in this age, for he was the last of a direct line of spiritual succession. What he taught represented no radical new theory, no Eastern counterpart to our own interminable scientific breakthroughs of the West, but the purest, highest, and indeed oldest spiritual tradition in the world. Babaji is the first in this direct line of gurus, a master of great antiquity. He still lives in the Badrinarayan section of the Himalayas, where he remains accessible to a few highly advanced souls. In the latter half of the 19th century, Babaji, feeling that in the present scientific age, mankind was better prepared to receive higher knowledge, directed his disciple, Shamacharan Lahiri, to reintroduce to the world the long-hidden, most central science of yoga. Lahiri Mahashaya, as his disciples called him, named this exalted science simply Kriya Yoga, which means divine union through a certain technique or spiritual act. Other yoga techniques bear the same name, but according to our own line of gurus, the Kriya Yoga of Lahiri Mahashaya is the most ancient and central of all yoga techniques. Babaji explained that it was to this technique that Lord Krishna, India's greatest ancient prophet, was referring in the Bhagavad Gita when he said, I related this imperishable yoga to Bibhiswat. Bibhiswat taught it to Manu, the ancient Hindu lawgiver. Manu gave it to Ishvaku, the renowned founder of the solar dynasty. In this way, it was handed down in orderly succession to great sages until, after long stretches of time, knowledge of that yoga deteriorated in the world because of the generality of mankind had lost touch with spiritual realities, according to Kali Yuga, in a decline in spirituality. Lahiri Mahashaya, like Babaji, was a great master of yoga, a Yogavatar, Master called him, an incarnation of yoga. Though at the same time a householder with worldly responsibilities, of the many disciples that he initiated, the chief of them was Swami Sri Yukteswar, modern India's Gyan Avatar, or incarnation of wisdom, as Yogananda designated him. Thus it was through Sri Yukteswar that Paramhansa Yogananda was sent to America with the high technique which our gurus said would give wise direction to the hitherto scattered and potentially dangerous development of modern Western civilization. In the divine plan, Yogananda stated on another occasion, Jesus Christ was responsible for the evolution of the West, and Krishna, later Babaji, was responsible for the evolution of the East. It was intended that the West specialize in developing objectively through logic and reason, and that the East specialize in inner, intuitive development. Now the time has come in the cosmic plan to combine these two halves of a circle. East and West must unite. And thus, through this reading, we see the plan that the great ones throughout the history of the world have developed and guided. And so let us take heart in these interesting times in which we live, that our gurus are in charge of this world's development. And everything that's happening, though it may seem difficult to understand, is all part of God's plan. And so let us take heart and have increased attunement for our masters and our discipleship and attunement with them.
So maybe I'll
Now Dharmadas will say a few words.
Okay. So I want to continue what I was saying at the beginning. That, and to segue on to what Nirmala was reading, that when we think of these masters and the span of history, it can be a little easy to get lost in the past, or to think, okay, well, that doesn't necessarily apply to me or us here and now today. And I just was really struck today by how Dwapara Yuga Swami Sri Yukteswar was, Master was, Swami was, or they all are, because they're all very much alive, just not in the body. But they each of them had to express that connection to Dwapara Yuga in ways that were relevant and sort of acceptable in the times that they lived. When Sri Yukteswar was alive and when he was writing the Holy Science, there wasn't really a word for energy. I mean, prana, obviously, but understood as sort of energy that's available to us to use. I mean, electricity was just coming in, the use of electricity. And so it just was uncommon. I mean, radio was still not really developed at that point. Television was, a vague fantasy. It was by no means, even realizable at that point. And so all of this has changed in the last century since Master came to this country. And one of the things that struck me is, if you think now, just pause for a moment and think of how you use your cell phone or your computer or any number of other sort of technological aspects of your life, and how, whatever you were doing 10 or 20 years ago, if you were using such a thing then, it's changed. And 10 or 20 years from now, it will have changed again. And very few aspects of the use of those things have continued sort of uninterrupted throughout that whole span. I mean, yes, I have, computer files that I can still open from 20 or 30 years ago, but often something needs to be upgraded. A subscription needs to be renewed or continued or, made in the first place. And it's like what Dwapara Yuga is saying to us is, kids, if you want to stay with the program, you got to keep putting out energy. You can't just like stop and say, no, it was perfect in 1999, or it was perfect in 1982 or 1950 when Master was still in the body, or it's like it's all moving. The river is moving, and we got to be in the river, and we got to learn how to paddle our little boat or swim or whatever we're doing with the current of Dwapara Yuga. And Master and Swami came to show us how to do that. And there was not a moment wasted in that process. And I can remember, I'll just read the little passage that I was going to read, which touches on this in an odd little way. So this is Swami visiting Master out at 29 Palms for the very first time. And so he says, my first visit to 29 Palms was for a weekend. We visited Master at his place. My first recollection of him on that occasion isn't so much of the things he said as of what he didn't say. I didn't know it at the time, but he placed great importance on silence. Disciples working around him were permitted to speak only when necessary. Silence, he said, is the altar of spirit. Master was seated out of doors by the garage. Bernard and I were standing nearby. Master asked Bernard to go into the house and fetch something. Suddenly, for the first time since my acceptance as a disciple, I found myself alone with my guru. It seemed an opportunity not to be missed, a chance to learn something, anything. Master evidently didn't see it in that same light. He made no move to speak. Finally, I decided I'd better break the ice. I had learned from Bernard how to commune inwardly with Om, the cosmic sound, which manifests itself to the yogi in deep meditation. Sir, I inquired, what does Om sound like? Master gave a prolonged Then he reverted comfortably to silence. To me, alas, his silence was anything but comfortable. How does one hear it? I persisted, though I already knew the technique. This time, Master didn't even bother to answer, but simply assumed the prescribed position. After holding it briefly, he returned his hand silently to his lap. Some months later, I told him I was having trouble calming my breath in meditation. That, he replied, is because you used to talk a lot. The influence has carried over. Well, he added consolingly, you were happy in that. Silence is the altar of spirit. As I grew into my new way of life, I began to value this maxim. And I'll continue in just a moment, but I'll just share my own experience of a similar, situation with Swami Kriyananda. So I was relatively new on the path. I found myself alone with Swami Kriyananda, which just, made me really nervous, just like, is he reading my thoughts? Is he, it's like, the mind just sort of goes to all these permutations, possibilities of, what is going to happen here? What should I do? How should I fill it in? Is this my priceless opportunity to ask him all the questions of my life, whatever? And he was just comfortable to be quiet. He did not feel the need to speak. He himself had referred to Rajarsi Janakananda, Master's foremost disciple, in the same way. He said Rajarsi had zero interest in small talk. He had it just was not part of his nature to engage in idle chatter. He just rested in silence. If he needed to say something, he would say it, but it was short, to the point, and otherwise silence. And with Swami, he was comfortable in that. And he didn't waste any motion. He didn't waste any movement. If there was a lesson to be learned, he would guide us into it. Does not mean that he explained it to us. And so I'll just continue with this reading briefly and sort of show the example of how that played out for Swamiji. Soon after our first visit to 29 Palms, Bernard drove Norman and me out there again. Master had devised a project for the two of us to work on, probably to give us an excuse to be near him while he concentrated on his writings. He asked us to build him a small swimming pool behind the house, near his bedroom. It was not that he particularly wanted a pool. In fact, once it was finished, he never used it. Or he used it once, and then he never used it again. But it did give Norman and me the opportunity to be with him for weeks at a time. Now, that pool is still there. We have laid eyes on it. I mean, it's still, there's still a little thing there in the yard. We saw it through the fence. If you think in the grand scheme of things, how relevant is a swimming pool? You know, a swimming pool in the desert. I mean, it's sort of an oddball thing to begin with. But for Swami and for Bernard and for Norman and any of the other ones who worked on it, it was a priceless opportunity to be with Master. Those minutes, those hours with him are chiseled in time as moments where he could learn and grow in a way that he would never ever do in any other way. And so he tells us, soon we were busy shoveling out a deep hole in the sand. Master, taking an occasional break from his writing, would come out and work with us for 15 minutes or so. Whenever he did so, I felt a deep blessing. But I hadn't yet adjusted to his habitual silence. One warm, sunny afternoon, I noticed that he was panting slightly with the physical exertion, and remarked conversationally, "It's hot work, isn't it?" "It is good work." Master gazed at me a moment as if with reproach, then returned in silence to his digging. Gradually, inspired by his example, I learned to speak less and to listen more to the soundless whispers in my soul. Late one afternoon, we were sitting with Master on a little porch outside the sitting room where he dictated his writings. After several minutes of silence, Master posed me an unexpected question. What keeps the Earth from shooting out into space away from the sun? Surprised, and not as yet familiar with the cryptic way he often taught us, I assumed he simply wanted a lesson in astronomy. "It's the sun's gravitational pull, sir," I explained. "Then what keeps the Earth from being drawn into the sun?" "That's the Earth's centrifugal force, pulling it constantly outward. If the sun's gravity weren't as strong as it is, we'd shoot off into space, out of the solar system altogether." Master smiled significantly. Had he intended more than I realized? Some months later, I recalled this conversation and understood that he had been speaking metaphorically of God as the sun, drawing all things back to himself, and of man as the earth, resisting with desires and self-interest the pull of divine love. And that little example of the way Master taught, the way Swamiji approached these things, they would put us in situations where we had to put out energy, where we had to do something, where we had to decide about something, and then they would leave it to us to figure out what we made of it. And, you know, if you were unfamiliar with that process, it could seem a little haphazard. It could seem a little, I don't know, just like, wow, why did he do that? Why am I doing this? You know, referencing the swimming pool, when they poured the concrete, they had to work for 24 straight hours so they wouldn't have any seams in the pool. And one of the devotees there, who I assume didn't stay on the path very long, was not happy about working so hard pouring concrete. And, ended up grumbling, I didn't come here to pour cement. And he was the only one who was tired after 24 straight hours of working, pouring concrete. The rest of them had become energized and full of joy. And, the masters would put us in situations where we have to choose. What will I do with this situation? Will I break towards the light? Will I just get huffy and annoyed and just go, ugh, yuck, this is not what I'm here for. I'm here to be all spiritual. And, our choice. What do we choose? How do we make of it? And Swamiji's example in life was just incredible in that regard, because he never stopped putting out energy. He never stopped trying to share with people, trying to serve people. And it's a beautiful, inspiring, and challenging example for all of us to follow in our lives. So maybe we'll chant some more.
What would you like?
How about I want only thee? Does that mess up your... You want to
No.
do a reading first?
Yeah, do a little short reading.
So Chaitanya, when those die, there's two more here.
People are so skillful in their ignorance, Master exclaimed once in exasperation after doing his best to help someone. And then in a discussion with a small group of us, he said, I see the spiritual path as a foot race. A few devotees are sprinting, others are jogging along slowly, some are even running backwards. The spiritual life, he told the monks on another occasion, is like a battle. Devotees are fighting their inner enemies of greed and ignorance, and many are wounded with the bullets of desire. Loyalty, devotion, regular meditation, attunement with the Guru. Armed with these, the devotee will surely win the battle, not easily perhaps, but in the end, gloriously. The more you do what your mind tells you, Master admonished us, the more you become a slave. The more you do God's will, the more you become free. So in that spirit, let's chant Swami's chant, I want only thee. Let's keep God in our minds and in our hearts. I want only thee, Lord, thee, only thee. 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 chant now one of Swamiji's chants, Om Namo Narayana. And I have a little story behind this, which is that many, many years ago in the or I guess it was the late 80s, a friend told me that he had heard Swami once chant this chant, Om Namo Narayana, but it wasn't in any of the chant books. It wasn't something that people knew about because Swami had only chanted it one time. And so this friend searched and found a recording of it. And I may be wrong, but I think that what happened was that Swami was in the middle of a lecture, and he, or the beginning of a lecture, and had to lead a chant, and he spontaneously wrote this chant as he was about to lecture, because we could never find it anywhere else. No one had ever heard of it. So what we did was we played that recording over and over and over and over until we got what we thought was exactly what we were hearing. And then, because I was Swami's assistant at the time, I took the music, the handwritten notes, and I took it to him and said, "Is this right?" And he was always very quiet about this chant. I had the feeling that it came from deep inspiration, and he wasn't quite sure he wanted to share it with everybody. But he very graciously did correct the music that we had come up with, particularly in the third part. There's a little triplet there that's still very difficult to sing, but he corrected it the way he wanted it, and he did subsequently, of course, let us put it in the Ananda chant book and Wave of the Sea and all of these other things, and did allow us to play it. But that's the little story behind it. I've always felt like this friend and I just unearthed a little jewel that would have been lost forever if we hadn't taken an interest in it and kept it shined up. And Swami would often say that he would wake up with melodies, or he would have them come to him spontaneously. Melodies were just always flooding through his consciousness, and he didn't always take the time to write them down. And I think that might have been what happened with this one.
And I also had an experience with this chant with him. This was an occasion where we were dedicating the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, or launching it, I guess I should say, in Delhi at an auditorium that held 2,000 people. And it was pretty well packed, and we had all these speakers lined up to speak before him, kind of introducing the evening and welcoming everybody. And, it was kind of a protocol to do that. But we had invited the chief minister of Delhi state to come, who was a very nice lady and very supportive of us and our work and Swamiji. And she agreed to come, but, she's a politician, and they were notoriously late to these functions. It's just like the law. They will be late. They can stop traffic anywhere at any time completely, but they're always late. And and Swami was never late. There was one time in India, one time and one time only when he was late, and that's when we were having this reading from Agastya, and it was his birthday, and the sky let loose, and the reading went on and on and on and on, and this 100-year storm was going on outside.
Trees were being uprooted.
Trees were falling over, the streets were flooding, and finally the reading ended and the storm ended. And then we went to the birthday function, and we were 1 hour late. And nobody batted an eyelash because he's the Swami, and Swamis are always late. Not our Swami, but, in general, that's just kind of assumed and expected. So, back to the launch of the Gita. So, this chief minister was running late. The function couldn't properly start without her because she was one of the early speakers. And the rule of thumb is that these hoity-toity speakers, they say their little piece and then they leave. It's like they've got other stuff they got to do, so they come, they give their little bit, and then they're gone. Well, you can't start without them. So we waited and we waited. And so we were trying to convince Swamiji, don't go out on the platform. Don't do it. Because, and he was like, but it's time to start. They're expecting me. I was like,
we knew he would be stuck.
We knew
there
he was
then
because
for
once
hours.
he goes out there, he can't leave. He's not. He's the main event. So he went out. There was no help for it. There was no stopping him. And so now what are we going to do? Now we've got this undetermined period of time with thousands of people waiting for this thing to begin. Dharmadas, Nirmala, chant. Okay, so we start chanting. And Swami's sitting right there. It's like, and there's a group of us chanting away. But we chanted for a half an hour with him sitting on the dais right nearby in front of all these thousands of people. Finally, somebody stood up and said, we came to hear Swami Kriyananda. It was like, what is it? And, the function got moving. But anyway, back to this chant. So this was one of the chants that I sang. And afterwards, Swami corrected me on this triplet thing. Because
it's tough. It's a hard thing to sing.
It's a tough little, anyway, you'll hear it. So anyway, enough talk about the chant. Let's chant the chant.
And you get to lead it.
No,
you get
No. You're the one looking at the music over there.
You are leading it.
Om Namo Narayana. 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 Om Namo
I'll just tell another story about Swami in India.
Okay. Okay.
Which reading?
The one that I just did? Okay.
For I want only thee?
Yeah.
Well, the reading where he says, a few devotees are sprinting, others are jogging along slowly, some are even running backwards. That page is 427. I can't hear you. The first one I read about the lineage that we follow is 218 and 219. How are we doing on time? I don't have a watch.
It's 8:15.
So we only have a few more minutes.
Yeah. We're going to go a little over. It's all right. We started late.
So the reading that we're about to do is, or maybe we don't have time for this.
Why don't we hear Swami?
Yeah. It
So,
leads into
Chaitanya, I'm going to mute my mic for a second, and then I'm going to plug in my phone to this, and you can pick it up. So give me just a second.
Swami is about to read a quote from Master. And just before that in the path, Swami is saying, I remember especially how stirred I was by a talk Master gave at a garden party in Beverly Hills on July 31st, 1949. Okay.
Some of my most impressive memories of Master are of his public lectures. While they lacked the sweet intimacy of his talks with the disciples, they rang with the spirit of a mission destined, he told us, to bring spiritual regeneration to the world, a new path in the sense of a teaching geared to the attitudes and understanding of this new age of energy. I remember especially how stirred I was by a talk he gave at a garden party in Beverly Hills on July 31st, 1949. Never had I imagined that the power of human speech could be so overwhelming. It was the most moving talk I have ever heard. This day, he thundered, punctuating every word, marks the birth of a new era. My spoken words are registered in the ether, in the Spirit of God, and they shall move the West. Self-realization has come to unite all religions. We must go on, not only those who are here, but thousands of youths must go north, south, east, and west to cover the earth with little colonies, demonstrating that simplicity of living plus high thinking leads to the greatest happiness.
I was stirred to my very core, Swami goes on. It would not have surprised me had the heavens opened up and a host of angels come streaming out, eyes ablaze, to do his bidding. Deeply I vowed that day to do my utmost to make his words a reality. 20 years later, with his inner help and by the grace of God, I was able to start the first of what have since become many thriving communities. Often during the years I was with Master, he exhorted his audiences to fulfill his cherished dream to found world brotherhood colonies or spiritual cooperative communities, not monasteries merely, but places where people in every walk of life could devote themselves to living for God. Environment is stronger than willpower, he often told us. He saw world brotherhood colonies as environments for fostering right spiritual attitudes, such as humility, trust, devotion, respect for others, and friendly cooperation. For people with worldly responsibilities who want a better way of life, small cooperative communities offer the best hope of fulfilling that desire, and also of demonstrating to society at large that people can indeed achieve heights so scornfully repudiated in this age of spiritual underachievers. Such communities, Master said, would emphasize cooperative attitudes rather than egoic social and political rights and present-day norms of cutthroat competition. Take the best advice I can give you, he said. Gather together those of you who share high ideals. Pool your resources. Buy land out in the country. A simple life will bring you inner freedom. Harmony with nature will bring you a happiness known to few city dwellers. In the company of other truth seekers, you will find it easier to meditate and think of God. What is the need for all the luxuries with which men and women surround themselves? Most of what they have, they are paying for on the installment plan. Then their debts are a source of unending worry to them. Even people whose luxuries have been paid off are not free. Attachment makes them slaves. They consider themselves freer for their possessions and don't see how in turn their possessions now possess them. He added, the day will come when this colony idea will spread through the world like wildfire. And we know how fast that can spread. In the overall plan of his mission, Yogananda saw individual students first taking lessons and then practicing Kriya Yoga in their own homes. Then in time, forming spiritual centers where they could meet once or twice weekly for group study and meditation. In areas where there was enough interest to warrant it, he wanted churches to be built with ministers. And where there was enough sincere devotees to justify it, his dream was that they would buy land and live cooperatively, serving God and sharing the spiritual life together on a full-time basis. And so we see Swami Kriyananda fulfilling this dream of Yogananda's that Yogananda tried to do in the 40s, but without much success, because he felt that he saw that the family unit was too locked in to the what he called the us four and no more concept, and so it wasn't time yet for this idea to take root. But now this is such an integral part of Yogananda's mission and what Swami came to help with. And so it's a big gift in Swami's discipleship to offer this way of life to the world. And before we chant another chant, I want to just say that when I came to Ananda in 1975, which really dates me, I know, but I didn't get to actually talk to Swami for quite a few months after I initially arrived and went into the apprentice program and worked in the garden and then worked in the master's market. And it wasn't until Christmas time that I had a chance to see Swami in person up close and get to say something to him. And I remember that I introduced myself to him at a Christmas party. And I remember saying, thank you for creating this place in which people can live together for God. Because it's such an amazing thing that in this world of crazy politics and war and strife and materialism, that there is a little oasis, several now throughout the world, these little oases where people can come together and meditate and love God. So that was the first thing that I said to Swami. And then in 2013, the very last thing that I wrote to him, he was in Italy and we were here in America, and we had plans to visit him for his birthday, but he passed away in April. And the last thing that I said to him, I can't remember if it was on the phone or in an email, but I said, thank you for all you've done to create these beautiful places on earth where we can gather to love God. And so it's a very special gift that Swami gave to his guru. And his life was always one of perfect discipleship. Swami never wanted to be a guru. He always wanted to be the perfect disciple. So let's all strive for that as well. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. So let's close now by sending out the vibrations of our masters and the love that Swami Kriyananda had for them. Let's send that vibration out to bless the whole world. And let's visualize our world harmonious, joyful, remembering God, living for God, feeling that healing blessing of God's light, His love, and His joy. Let's send out waves of Om, bringing this healing to our world. Om. 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 Hariom Tat Sat.
So before you close the stream, being that this is a perfectly glorious night to be out here in the garden, I felt like we should sing Nightingale, Song of the Nightingale.
Shall we sing it together?
Sorry?
Do you want everyone to sing it?
Sure, everybody, if you know the words, sing along.
How about Chaitanya and Michelle? Let's come up here and we'll sing it together. Put your mask on.
Okay, they're not going to be heard particularly, but
Well, here's a microphone.
okay.
Thank you.
So I'll sing the first verse and then jump in on the second. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Teach my heart to impart everywhere your delight. Sing of moon rays on the rain, sing that love's not in vain. Every grief, every wrong has its ending in song. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Teach all men how to spin clouds of gloom into light. Without silence, what is song? Without night, where is dawn? Were it not for men's woes, who would smile at our rose? Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Let each tone silence groan, earth and heaven unite. Morning laughter, evening tears, snow and blossoms all fade. Joy must sing in the night to face change unafraid. Nightingale, nightingale, nightingale. Joy must sing in the night to face change unafraid. So let's let joy sing in the night and face all the changes of our lives unafraid. God bless you all.
And for those dear friends who have joined us tonight, there is prasad. So sorry you're missing out online, but
You got digital prasad. Best as we could do. God bless. Jai Guru.